exploring spatial plans and city design efforts in a variety of settings like planned neighborhoods, new towns, historic cities, and mega regions. His research explores who does and should do the planning work. Who are the most important planning players in the urban India? What public policies and planning efforts do they employ in the pursuit of purposeful change? How do these decisions and on the ground actual outcomes impact the field of architecture? Which new opportunities do these interventions create for progressive designers? This conversation, Comprehending City Planning in Contemporary India, will explore answers to some of these questions from the vantage of future professionals and especially those who seek meaningful change leading to a more resilient future for this rapidly urbanizing country. So, welcome to KRVIA, and the mic is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys can hear me fine, right? Excellent. So
Yes.
I want to begin by thanking Mamta, Professor Mamta Patwardhan, for inviting me to this Encounter series. And I also want to thank KRVIA for holding this Encounter series. That I saw the list of prior speakers. It's a very impressive list of folks that you guys have gotten to hear. And I'm appreciative of the privilege and thankful for the invite. So what I want to do in next 35 minutes is talk to the young practitioners in making. Students sort of hold the key in my mind to a more resilient and a more sustainable future. But sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but it not really is. Because it's, it's the ideas that get developed in institutional spaces that shape the thinking of the next generation. And then the next generation sort of goes out and changes the field more often than not. Right? So the purpose of this talk is to talk to you guys and show you some of the cutting edge ideas from the perspective of city planning. City planning is important for architects to know because it shapes our work in fundamental ways. So when I say professional shaping built environment, it encompasses many, including engineers, planners, designers of various stripes, including architects. And architects play a key role. So the roadmap of the talk today is I want to talk a little bit about my research overview and trajectory, the kind of things I do, but that would be short. And then we would move on to the nature and meaning and purpose of city planning in contemporary India. And I'll show you and I'll share some insights about what's going on and why it is important for you guys to be aware of sort of the larger picture within which architectural design work takes place. And then we'll open it for discussion and questions and answers. So the research questions that guide my work are essentially, I seek to understand how Indian cities develop and why, right? And I came to this question via my professional work. I graduated college in 1991. I and Mamta and Pinkish, several of us overlapped at JJ. And once I was done with college, I headed back to Jaipur in Rajasthan. And that's where I worked for about 12 years. It was a very successful practice, not least because of the fact that India's economy had just opened up in early 1990s and professional opportunities abounded. Though my practice was successful, but I always had this nagging question in my mind, right? I mean, what am I doing? Why I design the way I do? What kind of influences shape my work? So I headed to graduate school first in Belgium, and I loved it so much that I continued on, did my PhD from Michigan, and then never left graduate school, and I continue to teach at Chicago, right? So the bigger question has always been is my work seeks to understand how Indian cities develop, what's the manner, what are the processes, what kind of influences, who are the players that shape that development, and why. And this is sort of guided by the question, not only from the perspective of critiquing it, but also from the notion, how can we do better than the past efforts? This is important, and that's why your work becomes important. You guys need to do better than us. And I hope my generation did better work than the preceding one. At this point in time, Indian cities are some of the hardest places to live anywhere in the world. And it is important that, the future practitioners do better in order to create and ameliorate the quality of urban life. But my work sort of is across scales and context. Within India, I sort of look at the national picture. I look at regional stuff, for example, national capital region. I'll share some work that I did around NCR. And of course, the city of Jaipur, a place I know well. I've had this connection with Jaipur for almost 30 years now. And before that, I grew up in the city of Udaipur, not very far from here. So, across scales and different contexts. This was my first book based on my dissertation, my doctoral work that published in 2015, sort of in which I tracked how Indian planning practice developed right after independence. We are a famous city design concept called the neighborhood unit that came to India in the post-war period. My second book that I wrote with a couple of colleagues, one from University of San Jose and another at University of Alberta, sort of sought to understand what's India's new approach to spatial urban planning and urban development after 1990s. My most recent book that just launched a few months ago, and in fact, its South Asia edition would be launched tomorrow at the National Conference of the Indian Town Planning Institute in Visakhapatnam. This I wrote with a couple of colleagues from SP and New Delhi, and sort of the history theory of city planning in India from 1947 to 2017. And then, Jaipur special, as I said, and this is more picturesque architectural work, a series of 3 books that sort of seek to understand, different aspects of Jaipur's architecture. The most recent one being a design monograph that sort of seeks to understand and illustrate the planning and designing processes of Hathigaon, which is a specialized settlement for elephants and Bahawals, right? So that's sort of the trajectory, across scale, cross disciplines, but the idea is to understand why Indian cities develop in the manner they do and why. So, few terms which are basic to my work that I want to share the definition so that we are all on the same page. First, what is city? And second, what is planning? So this is the current edge literature in the field. Cities are new and little understood entities. We know very little about cities. In fact, kind of city Mumbai did not exist about 150 years ago. Just to put it into perspective, human beings as Homo sapiens have been around on planet Earth for about 500,000 years. The first settlements, though, the settlement idea is that people living in close proximity appeared only about 40,000 years ago. And cities, where people and communities form, only about earliest ones 10,000 years ago, right? So 500,000 years and 10,000. And modern cities like Mumbai only about 150 years ago. So they're very new, completely man-made at some level, right? They're completely made by human beings. And there is no parallel of a city in the natural world. So keep this new. And they are, very, very little understood entities. And they're complex by very nature because they comprise interrelated networks of different kinds of densities. Densities of peoples, communities, buildings, commodities, ideas, flows of stuff, and more. What is planning, right? Most people think of planning as a government-sponsored formal activity. Sarkar ka daftar hota hai, town planning, and BMC does it, and MMRDA does it, and the Planning Commission does it, right? Very government. We sort of identify planning as a government exercise. And then the literature documents that most of that kind of planning is bad and failed, right? It doesn't work. The master plan idea got discredited across the world in 1990s, though in India we're still trying to do it, right? Mumbai is still trying to make a master plan despite umpteen failures of similar planning efforts in the past. So the emergent view of planning, especially in the Western literature, is these are purposeful efforts to anticipate and prepare for an uncertain future. We make plans because the future is permanently uncertain. We do not know what's going to happen tomorrow or maybe even the next hour. So we are always planning, always. And this kind of planning is sort of a hardwired human trait, utilized by all able persons. Everyone plans, right? Even the poorest people plan for tomorrow, livelihoods, retirement, recreation. So planning is something that comes naturally to human beings. Meanwhile, the perception of plans themselves as master plans or comprehensive plans is changing. We don't see plans as precise and predictive in character, but partial and provisional, right? Plans change all the time. They should be flexible. You can't say, so when you're making a master plan for 20-year horizon, you have no idea what would happen 5 years from now, right? No one could have predicted smartphones even 7, 8 years before they actually showed up, right? So the planning systems need to be flexible. The combination of changing expectations, people's expectations change, urban relationships change, all of that makes all-encompassing master planning very unrealistic and undesirable. Cities then, as I mentioned, are complex places built very incrementally, very slowly, hundreds of different actors over many generations, rather than a few state-sponsored plans that could be very powerful, right? But they can often do more harm than they actually do good. So cities, complex places, and planning needs to be more flexible. That's the insight. That's the way we should be thinking of planning at this point in time in 21st century. Now, when I started doing my research work, I figured out that planning work, though most people think of planning work as a government effort, but on the actual ground, planning work is a very broad enterprise involving a diverse range of actors: homeowners making plans, squatters making plans, developers, politicians make backroom plans, hidden plans, implicit plans, and they make all kinds of plans: informal, tacit, spontaneous, incremental, and so on and so forth. So, but none of these plans act in isolation or by themselves. Though the government's master plan seems the most powerful, but it rarely acts alone or in isolation. And it's essentially a constellation of plans, many plans that interact with each other, and they represent diverse goals of different actors, and they help negotiate. They're actually good because they help negotiate political, social differences in democratic societies like the United States and India, while gradually shaping cities and their regions over time, right? So the planning process, that's why it seems disconcerting. It seems chaotic. It's not. If you're paying attention, who are the planning players in whichever area or whichever domain of professional work you are pursuing, you figure out what's going on. And it's an interesting dynamic picture that changes more often than not. So I want to move to the case, which is sort of the meat of this presentation. I got interested, who are the most important players in India? What's going on? Who are making plans at this stage? If it is not only government, as I claim, I say there are many different actors making different kinds of plans. So this is the slides that sort of I looked at National Capital Region. I could have looked at Mumbai region or Calcutta region. Any region, if you see, NCR is just a representative example here. You find it's not only the government, but different kinds of plans. So I want to share a few insights for you guys from that work. So this is a map that shows NCR. It centers upon National Capital Territory of Delhi, that you sort of see in the pink color, and then encompasses districts from the surrounding states. It's a legally recognized region in terms that the Parliament of India approved a bill that sort of recognizes National Capital Region as a political jurisdiction with specific planning capabilities accorded to different states. So different districts together, of different states sort of make up this National Capital Region. It's a substantially bigger region, but it's also a very rural region. So just you get outside the NCT and parts of the districts that surround it are still quite rural in nature. I started tracking spatial plans in this area since the late 1990s, so it's about 20-25 years, and I found 4 main kinds of plan making activity here. The number one is, of course, state-sponsored plans at various different physical scales, right? For example, the state of Rajasthan has made a sub-regional plan for its geographical area that comprises NCR. Similarly, UP has made one, Haryana has made one, and then NCT has its plan anyway. And then there are other smaller plans that sort of shape, So there is, for example, a plan for these 3 small settlements that comprise the Rajasthan's urban complex. And, so the state is making plans at different spatial scales. It's not only one master plan. Some of these plans are mandated. That means they have legal backing. Some are non-mandated. That means they do not have legal standing. They were not published in the Gazette. Nonetheless, these are important plans made by government department and agencies. For example, forest departments, agriculture department, electricity departments. These are sort of seen as stated government policy, and they have legal standing. The frequently challenged and quotes. People are suing, people and communities, PILs of all kinds. So this is not, a top-down, indisputable instrument of an all-powerful state. But these are challenged all the time. And then there are existing agencies and new agencies. Many governments have created new agencies. For example, NHAI, National Highway Authority of India. It does its own planning work. It does not listen to architects or planners, but the engineers draw up roads. And as we know, roads shape up geographies in many dynamic ways, right? More than the master plan. In any area, you take a road out and you would see dynamically the land use around it would begin to change, irrespective of your master plan might have predicted. So, for example, this is the road network in NCR. And you sort of see in the dark black colors the more recent upgraded roads. And this road network, as all of you would have seen, has dramatically shaped the hinterland and the geography of India, connecting the largest cities, but also taking some of this urban growth across high-density corridors linking smaller settlements as well. The second kind of plans I found are sectoral plans. They target a particular specific sector. Now, unlike the preceding plans, these are centered around the initiative of state agencies and public sector undertakings, PSUs, in a particular sector. For example, the industrial sector, and I'll show an example of that, or power sector, or the road sector, or the infrastructure sector, or the agriculture sector. So they work, the sectoral plans. They focus on, they are neither mandated. If you go looking for sectoral plans, you don't find them. You have, but once you sort of look at different pieces of it and put them together, and then you look at the big picture through that particular sector, you say, wow. So that's how it's happening. Road is a good example. Who all are making roads in India at this point in time? So one is NHAI. They make usually national highways, sometimes also other specific roads, but mostly national highways. State governments have specialized agencies like MSRDC or RSDCC in Rajasthan, Maharashtra Road Development Corporation, state level highways, new ones included. Then you have PWD that sort of makes rural roads. Then you have agriculture department oftentimes making roads that connect farming areas to specific agriculture mandis, right? And then you have district authorities making plans for roads. 7, 8, 10 different agencies that make road in India. And you put all of their plan together, then you get the sectoral plan for the road. Those kind of sectoral plans, they're conceived sort of in a piecemeal and disjointed fashion, up and downstream players. But when you put it together, you sort of see how powerful these plans are, right? So, for example, this is a plan for DMIC, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, that is shaping this giant geography in unprecedented ways. As architects and as urban planners, we rarely pay attention to this. We are aware of it. You guys hear about it in the news. Maybe you read a coverage or a reportage in Times of India or Hindustan Times, but we need to get into this game. We need to be playing this more often, especially as the number of architects in this country grows and as more of us become more empowered via digital means, via means of higher education, we get to involve and get a piece of this action. So, right, that's the focus. There is, I believe, incredible opportunities for young folks at this point in time. You guys need to get involved with that. So, many sectoral plans are operationalized through new modes like public-private partnership. This is a location map for proposed development nodes via Rajasthan, right, where this is going, what kind of industrial areas are coming up, what kind of investment regions, and the work on this is overgoing already. So you can sort of see the giant geography these plans are shaping up. We talk about them very little, right? But these are powerful spatial plans that are changing the way we should be thinking. They promote usually basic infrastructure, but also other things. The third kind of projects, the third kind of plan I found were project plans. Now, project plans target specific areas and specific development works. For example, tourism of various kinds, business tourism, heritage tourism. State agencies usually make this plan. So this is for the Rajasthan state. Plans for new townships, right? So these are project level plans. Highest level are the state plans, then you have sectoral plans, and these are the project specific plans. Private as well as also public players are involved in this. Architects sort of begin to get some traction in the project plans, right? This we sort of think as the biggest where we should be involved naturally, but not the sectoral and the state, which I argue you guys should be paying. You should be keeping an eye out on those ones. And then the fourth one are these informal, tested, unforeseen, and spontaneously planned, right? These could be community-based, these could be squatters, these could be political deals. These are not formal, but they play a very important role in shaping Indian cities and urban regions. The way Indian planning system is set up, they are unauthorized usually simply by default. So whenever the politicians or the governments get a chance, they try and demolish them or move them or save them as vote banks for their electoral purposes. But owing to a variety of reasons, poverty, lack of space in formal planning systems, lack of recognition of community-driven initiatives, they continue to proliferate in a tacit manner across urban regions. And this is something we should be paying attention as well, right? These privately informal modes of planning, they're impossible to wish away. They're not going. If you speak to government planners, they recognize that we don't want them here, but they are an important piece of the puzzle. So 4 different kinds of plan making activity going on. My current ongoing sort of research looks at the patrons for each of these different kinds of plan making activity. And then also I'm sort of interviewing some of the leading architects who are involved in this kind of sort of an intermediate work, right? As architects, we usually pay attention, or we are trained in schools to pay attention to retail level design at the level of plots. So one way to think of this is across spatial scales. The lowest work is at the level of individual plots and campuses, right? This is what architects excel in. And I believe Indian architects have done fantastic work. Today, Indian architects have sort of succeeded to the extent that at the plot level, we make world-class hospitals, hotels, housing estates, beautiful buildings. But as soon as you step out of the plot, the chaos of the city begins, right? So plot level work, and then you have regional level infrastructural work. All these roads, electricity systems, train systems, airport system, all that is regional level stuff. So we've done fantastic work here. In the last 20 years, we've sort of begun to work at this bigger scale. The intermediate scale, urban design or city design scale is where we should be paying attention to. And that's what is an exciting open area for you guys. So the interplay of these 4 different kind of plans shaping Indian cities and their urban regions in unforeseen and unprecedented ways. You guys want to keep this bigger picture in mind as you go through your college experience and start looking at bigger opportunities. So these are largely invisible, but these are salient changes, including the emergence of different kinds of plans, creating many fresh opportunities for young professionals like you who would be shaping the built environment in the near future. The plan making, as I argue, is moving away from an exclusively state-centered focus. There are different kinds of patrons who are promoting spatial physical planning of places. And the changes, are mostly in line with larger shifts in the country's polity. This is something to keep in mind. The politics of the place shapes the planning of that place, and that planning shapes the architecture and design of that place. India's economy, India's society, India's politics is changing. Once that is changing, that is shaping a new kind of planning that is emerging in this country. And you guys as architects need to know, need to be aware, pay specific interest to understanding that planning because it shapes the work that we hold dear, is of creating meaningful places for people and communities and individuals and families and households to actively live, play, and work in creating more meaningful urban quality of life. So, with that, I hold my case. I'm proud that we did it in the 30 minutes, leaving good amount of time for questions and answers. Thank you. My email is on the board, right? And I'm happy to talk to you guys. If you are interested, we have two master's program, Master of Urban Planning and Policy, Master of City Design. If faculty folks are interested in collaborating with us, Mumbai and Chicago, I think, make good natural partners, both in terms of their scale, their size, their location, and global orientation. It would be fun to sort of reconnect with Mumbai again. So, thank you.
Hi, Sanjeev. Manoj Parmar here.
Sorry, yeah. Yes, Manoj.
Yeah, sorry, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah, I was about to invite you to speak, so great.
Yeah. Sanjeev, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sanjeev, it was a very nice presentation, talking about various aspects that planning, is seen through. I just want to understand understand your views on two aspects, which I think concern most of the Indian cities, especially small cities and medium-sized cities. That is the smart city mission and informality in the city. How do you see this planning? What kind of planning, paradigm that you see that would kind of I don't want to say tackle, but at least understand this, informality and this new paradigm, smart city mission? What are your views on that?
So great question, Manoj. So my sense is, starting with JNNURM, right? So early 2000s, Delhi decided that the quality of urban life in India has deteriorated substantially. And cities, an increasing amount of economic activity comes out of cities. Almost 2/3 of India's GDP is now urban center, and only about 1/3 is rural center. So if cities are the engines of India's economic growth, we need to create better infrastructure in order to grow India's economy. That's Delhi's interest. How do we do it? Cities, we know, are not fiscally empowered. State governments have their own grind, their own access to grind. So Delhi has begun to give money directly to cities. This is unprecedented. Throughout India's history, Delhi usually took money from cities. It never gave money directly to cities. So JNNURM was the first centrally sponsored scheme that gave money directly to cities. 1 lakh crore, right? Smart cities is an extension of the same idea. It's a different name, and they're saying we want to create smart cities, which we know. We first need to define what is smart. As I said, city itself is a new complex entity. We don't know a great detail about cities yet. But smart city, its slogan is let's move smart cities to the side. But think about what Delhi is doing. It is pumping money directly into cities. Another 1 lakh crore rupees that comes directly to cities. Cities need to match that grant. States need to put in some money, right? So everyone needs to get some skin in the game. So smart city, JNNURM, and there would be more, which is a good news because urban sector has become a priority for the central government. So the way I make of smart city movement is a direct state central government subsidy that comes to India's largest cities. And these cities are regionally spread. So what Delhi wants is more economic growth that would come out of better urban infrastructure. The second point, informality. Informality is, the way I think of it is a equal, so formal and informal is the flip side of the same coin. They are intertwined twins. There's no informality unless we have formality, and vice versa. So as architects and as planners of urban India, we need to be cognizant of this fact and plan with informality, not around it. And how do we engage with it is a more recent question. Engaging with informality as an educational or pedagogical instrument didn't exist until about 1990s when we were going to school. So it's sort of a more recent, community level work that architects have sort of begun to engage. But we have to do it, and we cannot escape informality if we are designing for this intermediate urban space within India. So both your points I see are very important and fundamental. Delhi would continue to provide money in the foreseeable future, which is good news for urban infrastructure, and informality would continue to be important because we can't wish it away. It is an intrinsic part of our urban tradition in many different and enriching ways. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's good view. I think. Thanks. I think you have more questions. I guess let's read them.
Yes, thank you so much, Manoj, and thank you for answering the question. We do have two questions in the chat box, so we can take those up. We have one from Saumil Sangvi. Would you like to unmute and ask the question yourself, Saumil?
Okay. Hi. So I wanted to ask, as architects, is there a way to reduce the negative impacts of state planning policy at the level of the city or the state? At the level of the plot, it can be done through the scale, through architectural design. But then, is there a way in which it can be done at larger levels also?
That's an interesting question, Saumil. But it's a political question in the sense we would have to organize more robustly. So think of our organizations. Voluntary organizations like IIA, who can play a role where architects get together and sort of create, let's say, alternative. I think this would be very interesting. Alternative plans for places. The government makes their plans, which, as you point out, might not be the best for those places. Can we propose to the general public alternate plans, right? So unless we do that, no, this is very difficult to sort of mediate or encounter, right? That's the name of the series, to encounter some of the bad planning, which is bureaucratic, corrupt, and rigid, that comes out of some of these centralized places that seek to make decisions in a very top-down manner for local places. That would be my thinking on
this. Hello.
Yes.
Hi Sanjeev, this is Shima here, and I teach as a guest faculty at KRVIA. And I have really used your work extensively for my PhD work, where I've written the urban history of Patna. And I was really looking forward that you would talk a little more on the housing board and the improvement trust. And moving from, because my interest is in the small and medium towns in North India, and I still think that the practice of writing history of especially housing boards and improvement trust gives a lot of insight to what we are talking now. Yeah. And so what do you think about, like we have given up and we're like really engaging with a lot of current questions, but we are not really mapping where do we come from? Like I went with this whole question about, what is formal, informal, and I realized that we don't know what is formal. And the Patna Improvement Trust for land encroachment or elite encroachment, what we talked today, defines a lot of which these small and medium towns are particularly engaging or struggling with.
I cannot agree more. You hit the nail on the head here. But I think the good news or the silver lining to the cloud is, this conversation that, what you just said would have been almost impossible 20, 30 years ago. People were not even talking about it. At least now we begin to talk about it. And my sense is as our community grows, right, as architecture becomes a more organized field, as people from other disciplines like sociology and political science and anthropology and urban planning and geography, and we all need to sort of work together because cities are complex places. They're not really only the